Welcome to Radical Personal Finance. My name is Joshua Sheets. I'm your host. Today on the show, I would like to share with you an idea that I have been thinking about for quite a while. Put simply, the idea is this: all wealth is ultimately biological. All wealth is ultimately biological. Now, I'm going to defend that thesis to you in a number of different ways throughout the course of this podcast episode. But what I'm trying to accomplish is to get you to think about and consider the different ways in which it's actually people that really matter, the different ways in which it's actually biology that matters, even in the simplest and barest of facts. Now, let's begin with the obvious applications of this statement that all wealth is ultimately biological. Ask you a question. If you had to choose between one or the other, which would you choose? An exceedingly fat purse or a healthy body? Would you rather have a very fat bank account, a net worth statement that is beautiful in measured of financial assets, and be lying in a sick bed looking outside? Or would you rather have very little in the way of financial wealth and yet have a healthy and robust body? Well, we know that, while of course there might be exceptions, we know that virtually everybody who has money and who becomes sick, those people will quickly go and spend huge quantities of their fortune seeking a cure for their sickness. So we know that wealthy people routinely make the decision that having a healthy body, being cured of their illness, is more important than having a heavy purse. Now, similarly, which would you rather choose? A heavy purse or to be younger? Who is truly wealthy, the rich or the young? None of us are actually able to choose, but what you see is that wealthy people are quite well prepared to sign up for any number of treatments and therapies and supplement programs that can regain some of their youth and vigor. And most of us, as we get older, we start to look with more and more jealousy on the 20-year-old, on the 30-year-old. So, it's obvious by the way that actually wealthy people spend their money that actually wealthy people value youth and health more than they value wealth. You say, well, Joshua, that's easy to say once you're rich. Obviously, once you're a multi-millionaire, then of course it's no big deal to spend a few millions on your health. And of course, there's probably an element of truth to that. But you see this played out at every level of society. Even a pauper will go into debt to try to save his life, to try to save the life of the woman he loves, of the child that he loves. And so if you are fortunate today to be in generally robust health, if you are fortunate today for those around you, your loved ones, to be in generally good health, recognize your good fortune and recognize that while it may be true that you'd like to have a little bit more gold in your purse, in truth, you are genuinely wealthy because you have biological wealth. You have health and you have youth. Now, that's the obvious application, right? I've not given you any great news, but I believe this statement that all wealth is ultimately biological is a statement that goes much farther. So, for example, I find it self-evident that all financial assets ultimately derive their value from what other people are willing to pay for them. This starts at the most base level of currency. Currency has its value only because other people want that currency. If you and your currency goes through some kind of social change and people no longer want your currency, then you quickly find out that currency is not wealth. But even a gold coin derives its value only by the fact that someone else wants it. Oceanfront property. A piece of oceanfront property is only valuable because of where it is, especially with regard to the people around it, not because of any inherent actual value because it's oceanfront. I've traveled many parts of the world. I have driven down oceanfront property that can be had for a few $1,000s. And you can build your house right by the seaside. And yet it only costs you a few $1,000s to build a house there, when if you were to go to San Diego, California, or Hawaii, or many places all around the world, you would find that that same amount of land will cost you millions and millions of dollars. You want to go and build a home on the French Riviera or the Italian Riviera or Miami, Florida, you will pay millions and millions of dollars for raw land, where if you went just a few hundreds of miles away, jumped on an airplane, it would be a few $1,000s. So what is it that makes that oceanfront property valuable? Is it the fact that it is oceanfront property? Or is it the people? The biological entities called people that surround that property. The people that you want to be around make that property valuable for you. And that connection may be due to a personal connection. Your loved ones may be there. Your biological relations may be there. Your friends may be there in that place. And that's what makes it valuable. I have frequently worked with clients who live in places they would probably rather not live because the people that they love live nearby. And that's a very good reason to continue living in that place. But even deeper than that, right? The oceanfront property in one highly desirable place is desirable not because of the bare geography, but because of the people who are there and what kind of people they are at their core, what they've built, what that town represents, what that system represents, what that nation represents. The oceanfront property is beautiful only because it's cared for by beautiful people who value beauty. You can go to one piece of oceanfront property and find it to be sparkling clean. And if a piece of plastic or a piece of paper dares to wash up on the beach, the residents around swoop in on it, scoop it up, and dispose of it appropriately. You can go to a different piece of oceanfront property, and you can find there the people literally dumping their refuse on the beach. The property is only kept beautiful because of the beautiful people who care about it. So therefore, the actual wealth of the place is biological. I'll give you just an example. Years ago, on our honeymoon, my wife and I went to Haiti. And we toured all around Haiti. We started in Port-au-Prince, and then we went to a seaside town called Jacmel. And if I recall my Haitian geography correctly, we specifically, from Jacmel, I hired tour guides to take us to a place called the Bassin Bleu, and the blue pools, basically, the blue basins. And these blue pools, these blue basins are a beautiful, spectacular natural feature. There's a canyon that has some waterfalls coming down into the canyon, and there are these pools at the base of the waterfall that are deeply vibrant blue. They're rich and they're beautiful, and they're really blue. And so I had seen information about this, and I wanted to tour the site. So I hired a tour guide to take us up. We went up there, and we walked up through the woods to get to these pools. Now, there was no trash at the actual pool. But all the way to the pool and back along the trail was strewn with trash. And there wasn't so much of it that something couldn't be done about it. It wasn't like, the beaches in Haiti or other places where the trash is a couple inches thick. It was just little pieces of litter. And I was so frustrated on the way back at the spectacular beauty of the place and the trash along the trail that I just started picking up as much trash as I could. And I was reasoning with the guides. I had spent quite a lot of money to hire the guides to take us there and give us the rides there. And I was just explaining to them. I said, listen, guys, why don't you pick up the trash? And they had no mental concept for picking up any trash along the trail. And I explained to them, I said, you are stewarding a spectacular resource here, a spectacularly beautiful pool. I said, this is really nice. I have paid a lot of money to get here to this place and to visit this natural feature. And I've paid you a lot of money to bring me. Don't you like it? I said, yes, we do like it. I said, wouldn't you like to have someone like me come every day? Yeah, that'd be great. Well, there was no one else there. And so I said, you could improve this if you just did the bare minimum of bringing a large garbage sack and make sure that while the rest of the country may be filled with trash, you at least make sure that this trail going up to these pools is not filled with trash. I don't recall, I doubt I made any difference. Maybe I did. I have not been back since then, so I don't want to judge them. But they refused to pick up any trash. My wife and I picked up a bag full and carted it all out. And the concept was just utterly foreign to them. And meanwhile, I have spent my life in much less naturally beautiful places that I've paid lots of money to access and that make a lot more money simply because those physical pieces of geography are cared for by people who keep the place picked up. And so there is always going to be a biological reality, even to the most basic of assets, such as a physical property. In addition to that, assets are valuable only because you raise up people who value them. Think about something like a beautiful set of furniture, right? Your grandmother's china cabinet and her china and her crystal that she really valued. She saved for years to buy that beautiful art, to purchase those expensive and beautiful possessions. She saved for years to put that art on her wall. Now, if she did not raise up people who valued those possessions, or if the society around did not raise up people who valued those possessions, then they don't have anywhere near the resale value that they would otherwise have. I'm not an expert on antiques. It doesn't really fit into my lifestyle at the moment. Someday I would love to be somebody who had a bunch of beautiful furniture and things like that. At the moment, we have young children, and that has not been something that we have pursued. However, someday I'd like to be that kind of person. That's my aspiration and my ambition. And I believe that I'm correct in saying that if you want to go buy antiques, right now is the time to do it. Why? Why are antiques so cheap? Why is china so cheap? Why is the china cabinet so cheap? Why is the crystal so cheap? Why is the silverware so cheap? Well, because you had a huge population of people who valued those things, and that population of people didn't particularly raise up heirs who would also value those things. So the things they spent a bunch of money on are not nearly so desirable in the marketplace, and now their stuff is selling for a big discount. And so you see this everywhere, that ultimately the value of the asset, it's only valuable because you raise up people who value that asset. If you didn't have children, or if your children grew up to value the great beigeification and the grayification of all, and they just want to live in a sterile environment, then your beautiful, warm antiques are not going to have value. So truly, the value of an asset is biological. It's based upon the people who want it. It's based upon what it can do for the people who are around. Imagine that you invested in an oil well. Why does that oil have value? Well, it has value because of what it can do for the people. So the financial asset itself is not the thing that is valuable. The wealth is driven by biology, by the people who value it. At the end of your life, even, your money, if you just have money, won't buy you the love and the lifestyle that you want to have. I consider one of the saddest realities that many people live in, is that you can be a wealthy person and you can spend the last few years of your life being physically abused by a foreigner in an institutional care home because you tried to buy care with money and you wound up in an institution being cared for by foreigners who abuse you. Elder abuse is one of the most disturbing and upsetting things. Even just elder fraud, right? A more mild form of elder abuse is one of the most disturbing things. And yet, if you have all the money and you can't find the people who can care for you, who will love you, who respect you, are you really wealthy? You might have no money and be lovingly tended in your old age by your beautiful granddaughter who cares for you. You may be surrounded by the love of your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. And would you not rather have that than have digits on a piece of paper? Financial assets themselves only grow, are only cared for, they only endure because of biology, because of those who are raised with the honor and the culture and the commitment to care for them and to steward them. And faithful stewards are hard to find. The culture that creates a faithful steward is an incredible culture. It's something that needs to be honored. Think about it, right? Let's say you go to a financial planner, you go to your lawyer, and you draw up all these beautiful trusts, right? You spend tens of thousands of dollars for these exquisitely composed, beautifully written trust documents. Do you not see how all of that is utterly fake? That literally all somebody has to do is come to where you are or come to where the assets are held, point a gun in your face and take your things. Every aspect of trust planning, every aspect of accounts and of stewardship and of protection, it's all fake in the sense that it's not tangible. It depends entirely upon civilization. And a civilization, a culture that creates the concept of stewardship, a culture that creates the concept of faithfulness to the wishes of the grantor, a culture that subjects the current desires that a person has for wealth, for gain, to the rule of law, is a truly unique thing. You travel around the world and you spend time in some places and you quickly discover that your neighbors are simply out to steal from you. And if you turn your back for a second, if you lower your guard for a moment, if your gate stays open for a minute, then very quickly your possessions and your life are forfeit. Now you could go to other places in the world where there is a strong biological wealth. And you have a culture where, if you leave your gate open, your neighbor will walk across the street and close your gate. If you turn your back, your neighbor's got it. That's true wealth. The amount of money that you need to live in the first culture, where there is no respect, no camaraderie, no working together, is truly astonishing. To try to get to the level where you can pay enough guards to protect your things. And even then, you don't sleep well at night because someone else may come along and pay them more to betray you. But most of us go to sleep at night rest well without fear of betrayal because of our neighbors, because of the biological wealth of a community. Civilization is a miracle. It is not the norm. It is the aberration. It is the exception. And yet civilization is built on biological faithfulness. It's built on the ability to raise up generations and to inculcate into those generations the values of their forebears, such that your great-great-grandchildren will respect the fake words written on a document that represent the wishes of their great-great-grandfather, their great-great-grandmother. And they will continue to fulfill those wishes when their great-great-grandfather, their great-great-grandmother can do nothing to affect their life. Do you not see how all of that is based upon biological faithfulness, based upon the people and the culture? And that when you have it, then, of course, the financial assets have their value. They can be managed. But if you don't have it, you can do almost nothing. All wealth at its most basic level is biological. There's no such thing as hard money that has its value absent the people. There's no such thing as something as a resource that is inherently valuable without people. And yet when you have people, when you have culture, when you have community, when you have love, when you have righteousness, those are the things that ultimately pay off for the flourishing of the people involved. So here's my question. What would you do if what I'm saying is true? What would you do differently if you believed that what I'm saying is true? Well, there are some obvious applications that we would all agree on. You would, for example, obviously invest into yourself, into your own biology. You would invest into your health. You would spend more money on healthy food because that builds the substance of your biology. And you would do that so that you passed along a stronger genetic heritage to your children. And you would make certain that you were constantly investing into high-quality nutrition and into a healthy lifestyle. You would eliminate vices because you would recognize that these vices are going to leave me at the end of my life sick and alone. I had a close friend die somewhat recently, and he was a very good friend, but it was just kind of the archetypal example of everything that you could do wrong. He spent his life abusing his body, and he died at an early age because he abused his body and was sick at an early age. He never enjoyed even the fruits of, he was fairly wealthy, but he never even enjoyed the fruits of his wealth, never even enjoyed retirement in the sense that many people want to, because he died early. And what's worse, he died entirely alone. He was not surrounded by love. He never married, never had children. His life was chaos. And he had purchased a bunch of stuff, and within a week or two of his death, 5 dumpsters full of his treasures were just hauled away to the dump. Extremely, extremely sad to me. So if it were true that true wealth is biological, then you would take your health seriously, and I would too, right? I'm preaching to myself. I would too. You would also invest further into biology. You would have children and you would invest into them. You would purchase the best of things that nourish them, the best food. You would make sure they got good sleep. You would make sure they were healthy and strong. You would seek to impart to them all of the lessons that you wish you had in your youth. You would seek to see them advance beyond you. You would enjoy your children. You would make time for them. You would recognize that the true wealth of life is being able to go out and play catch on the backyard with your sons. The true wealth of life is being able to enjoy the sunset with your children. These moments are fleeting. and that these are the things that you will reflect on. You would invest further into your neighbors, into your friends. You would build a culture, a community in which your values were honored. You would seek to be in a place where your wishes would be carried out. If you saw something destructive to your civilization, to your culture, you would stand up and you would say, no, this must end. Because you would know that if you do not succeed in being the constant link in the chain, if your link is broken in that chain, then all of the assumptions that you grew up with of a stable society, of the ability to put money into trusts and have those trusts respected, you could see that within a generation, all of that can be gone. You would invest into building culture, into building civilization, into your neighbors. You would invest into sharing and investing your ideas into them in a desire to raise faithful heirs. In closing, you would care about people in a really unique way. One of the things that has driven my thinking on this subject comes from pondering, as I have for many years, pondering the aspects, the essence of what Jesus taught in the New Testament with regard to gold and silver, right? So in the New Testament, Jesus said, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And as a longtime financial planner, as a longtime Christian, it's one of the most difficult passages to wrap your mind around. What is the essence of this? And I see it as taking the prohibitive stance, right, the negative stance, or taking the positive stance, the decree stance. So you can focus on that passage and you can say, Jesus says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. And you can quickly seek to get rid of treasures as quickly as possible. And that is the fundamentalist Christian position. I have known and have friends who've done this, and I think that it is greatly to be admired. I believe that actual eschewing, total eschewing of wealth, the life of an ascetic, is something to be honored. I think that there's something beautiful about meeting an ascetic. I appreciate Christian asceticism. I don't think it's a universal command because of all of the other passages that seem to promote wealth, seem to see wealth as the blessings of God, and seem to imbue responsibility that comes with wealth. Many times I think it would be much easier to just get rid of wealth and just choose not to store up treasures on earth than it is to actually steward the treasures that you have. It's very difficult to be absurdly wealthy, as you and I are, and know how to handle that in a morally upright position, right? Every single person listening to my voice, we are all in the top 1% of wealth as measured by all of history, right? We are the wealthiest people in the history of the world. We don't go to sleep at night wondering if we're going to eat tomorrow, as the vast majority of humans always have. We don't go to sleep at night wondering about violence, as the vast majority of humans always have. So we are all wealthy. And even if we tried to get rid of all of our gold and silver, we are still the inheritors of that system. So I have always looked at this, while I appreciate the prohibition, right, the negative side, I've always looked at this more on the positive side. And I've said, what is Jesus saying? And at its core, my conviction is that Jesus is saying, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Well, that's unique, right? Because where is heaven? Heaven is not a physical location. So therefore, there's not actually physical gold and physical silver in heaven. Heaven is a metaphysical construct, right? It is not a physical location. It's in another dimension. And the only thing that is in heaven is the souls of man. And so I've always taken that and I've said, Jesus is saying, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven by investing into the souls of man. And when you look at the world in that way, you wind up with something akin to what I've described in the idea that all wealth is ultimately biological. If I were going to argue against the position that I've laid out in the first 20 minutes of this podcast, I would defeat my argument by saying all wealth is ultimately spiritual. Because it's the essence of spirituality that could be applied to what I've described as biological. Feeling and experiencing love, energy, strength, and vitality. These are fundamentally spiritual experiences, not physical, biological experiences. Right? They're spiritual experiences. If you think about the horror of being institutionalized as an old man, being cared for by, excuse me, I misspoke. If you think about the horror of being institutionalized as an old man and being abused by a foreigner, as compared to the beauty of being in the home of your beautiful granddaughter and being cared for by those who love you, the difference between those things, yes, is partly biological, but it's truly spiritual. It's a metaphysical experience of love and of warmth and of closeness and of assurity, not actually a biological thing. And so, at its core, if we take money, which can be destroyed, can be stolen, can be corrupted, and we invest it into people, we have the essence of a really, really compelling life, of a really, really fulfilling way of obeying the commands of Jesus. And we seek to store up by investing into the souls of man, because that's ultimately what's in heaven. But in order to do that, you have to break free of the shackles of physical determinism. And you have to see the world not in hard assets, but in terms of valuing people. And then you get around to investing into people, investing into yourself, investing into your education, into your health, into your strength, into your abilities, investing into your children, investing into them and their health and their strength and their community, investing into your neighbors, and investing into future generations. That is ultimately how you do it. And so, perhaps one of the clearest teachings of Jesus, of what I've talked about, I've also pondered for years the parable, the unfaithful steward. Probably the most confusing of all of the parables that Jesus taught. When he said, shrewd are the sons of men, right, who use unrighteous mammon to buy friends on earth. You see this continuity of it. And you see that when you recognize that ultimately it's not a physical accumulation of money, but it's a biological and spiritual accumulation of assets, the world makes more sense. And when you recognize that the money itself is just basically an accounting of contribution, everything makes sense in life. But in order to do that, you got to break out of the very hard-nosed, tally up the zeros and the ones and the nines. And you got to see the world in kind of a woo-woo sense of energy and contribution. But once you do, life is exciting because no longer are you dealing with a fixed quantity, a fixed substance of only a certain amount of money that you can control. There's only a certain amount of money available and you have to figure out how to get some. You're dealing with something that is truly unlimited because biology is unlimited. Spirituality is unlimited. And you know how to be abased and how to abound, how to be content with little and how to be content with a lot. And you recognize the truths, right? I think of the Proverbs of better is a dry morsel with quiet than a house full of feasting with strife. And you recognize that that is actually true. right? Better to live in the corner of the housetop than in a house with a quarrelsome wife. You recognize that it's not the opulence of the house that makes the difference. It is the serenity of the home that truly matters, because you invest in people. So I hope you'll consider my argument. I will not labor on the defeaters that I've presented of being spiritual, although I would acknowledge that is true. Just recognize that all wealth is truly biological. And so throughout your life, you should continually be looking to turn and transform the inanimate into the animate. You should be looking to work as an alchemist, to transform the worthless gold and silver into the eternally valuable souls of man. That is where you will find fruitful labor for your entire lifetime, contentment, and joy.